So hello, welcome to the Essence for Agility Meetup. Welcome, especially if you're one of the newer members. I spotted on the sign up, so some people have not been to the group before. So welcome. Hopefully you'll enjoy tonight and perhaps go back and look at some of the recordings from previous events. For those of you that don't know, Essence for Agility is a community aimed at exploring essence, which is a standard to describe practices and methods, and better enables us to pick the right set of practices for our context, regardless of which method they belong to, and also to improve our application of the method. So today's event explores essence, the past, the present, and looks to the future. And it's going to be in a discussion format. I'll host, I'll ask Ivar and Pierre some questions, and I'll be doing some of the content myself as well. But it's not just the three of us. I'd like you to get involved also. Please use the chat to ask us questions. There's going to be a little bit of interaction in some of it. So please feel like you should get involved because this is your community as much as it is ours. And your views are just as valid and I'm sure just as interesting, if not more interesting, come to that. So first, I'll introduce our guests. Ivar Jakobsen should probably need no introduction for most of you. He is an innovator and industry leader and has been for decades. Ivar's been responsible in one way or another for component architecture, UML, use cases, and of course, Essence. Pierre Martin is a French engineer and tech entrepreneur who's co-founded many startups, many of which were successful, but not all. So he's learned a lot from his failures as well. And he's worked around the world in cities such as Lisbon, London, Los Angeles, and is currently based in Ljubljana in Slovenia. So if anybody is in a city that begins with the letter L, then let Pierre know he might want to move there later. And Pierre leads the tech teams for Ivar, building the next generation of Essence tooling. And my name is Simon Girvin. I'm an Essence coach and co-author of the book Agile from First Principles. I spent 25 years working in the UK and Australian governments in a variety of technical leadership and agile roles. And I came to work for Ivar a few years ago as product manager and principal consultant for Essence, where I lead on developing new practices, setting the vision and strategy, and helping our clients get the best results from Essence and from the tooling. So between us, the three of you, we'll talk through Essence, the past, the present, and the future. If there are questions as we go through them, please ask them in the chat. I'll try and pick them up and we can try and make this quite interactive. Okay, so this is what we're going to talk about: past, the present, and the future. And I'll begin by just going through a little bit of the timeline, and I'll ask Ivar to jump in a second. But his story with practices and methods dates back to when he was with Ericsson in 1967 as creator of component-based development, creator of use cases in 1986, ROP and UML in 1997, Waypointer, which was at the forefront of AI back in 2000, and then Essence emerged around 2009. It became an OMG standard in 2014, and then it's been in active use since then. But I do want to ask you, Ivar, about the bit in the middle, this Gustav Dalin medal, the little Nobel Prize. Tell us a bit about what that was for.
Oh, yeah, I got a surprise call from Chalmers Institute of Technology in Gothenburg, and they told me that I got the Gustav Dalin medal. Gustav Dalin was a Swedish Nobel Prize winner. I think he got the Nobel Prize in early 1900 something for all kinds of things. And it was, it was a prestigious thing. I was very happy to get it. I got it at the time when most people start to think about retirement. But as you can see, I didn't do that. So it was, and the most interesting was, of course, a very nice party in Gothenburg.
I'd like to take you back, Ivar, to the work you were doing prior to Essence, the work that was in some ways formative. So I'm thinking about the work with the Rational Unified Process and then Waypointer, but they're very different from Essence. Can you talk us through some of the differences and then what led to Essence being the idea that you came up with?
If we start with what became RAP, it was actually, I'd worked at Ericsson many years, and I felt we needed something that was more generic, because the methodology we used for the product that was very successful in Sweden, not only in Sweden, worldwide, it was the AXE product. That methodology was embedded in the system. So you couldn't really talk about the method without talking about the system. So one of the things I did is actually I extracted the method and made it more general. So it's not specific for anything. And then what was really unique, I designed the process as if it was software, with components and interfaces and so on between different things. So it was a methodology, and it was Ration Software acquired my company, and they made it very successful. They did some additions that were very important, and called it Ration Unified Process. But I felt it was crazy. Crazy that one single company had such a dominating role, that people like me were gurus that had a huge impact on selling process. So we were methodology salespeople. And I really never felt that cannot be right for an industry. So I didn't do what many people did. They converted their existing method to become an agile method. We had ideas about doing it. We did a simplification. There were companies, there were people that did it, not the least Ration itself. But that now was owned by IBM, by the way. So
what about Waypointer? What because that was a RUP dedicated to
Waypointer was a different thing. Waypointer was I mean, I've always been thinking from 1981, I was working with AI systems, and I saw an opportunity because RUP was really complex. Basically, to do RUP very easy by applying, at that time, modern AI techniques, namely intelligent agents. Intelligent agents was, you could describe it as object-oriented expert systems. So we developed a product Waypointer that supported RUP, at least the essentials of RUP. And that product became very popular. It was successful, but it came at the wrong time. We got an award, actually a Jolt Award, for being one of the best tools, 2003 or 4.
And what went wrong?
Yeah, it was wrong that it came at the time when Agile came, and Agile was absolutely anti AI and anti anything related to the process at that time. I think I understood very quickly that AI would have a huge impact, that Agile would have a huge impact. And I just decided to withdraw the product and wait till we got a better time. And that came a year or so ago, a little bit more than a year ago, when we got ChatGPT.
So there, obviously, at the time when Agile was coming out, one response was to build a different framework that was similar to RUP in the sense that it would cover all these areas that RUP does on the left. And we see that with some of the big frameworks that they give everybody, give a solution to everything. But that's not the approach you took with Essence. And there's some significant differences between where RUP was and where Essence is. I'm thinking of things like the focus on workflow and tasks and documents within RUP as opposed to Essence. So can you talk us through the thinking that led you to come towards Essence's philosophy as opposed to where you had been with RUP?
Yeah, first of all, I understood from my experience that there will never be one method, one methodology that works for everything, and that we'll be able to continuously develop and become the method of a day forever. That would never happen. Instead, I saw that it's okay. There are competing, let's say, practices. So instead of doing, for instance, feature-driven development, you could do use case-driven development, or so that would be okay. Let people select themselves, and instead identify what is the common ground for all these methods we have out there. What is it that we think is essential? And that was not focusing on things like activities and things to do and things to produce, like documents. It was about real outcome. What is it that you really have achieved, and be able to measure that? So it was more focus on outcome, and the outcome could be measured by states of important things.
And the way you got to that outcome could be in many different ways, and you didn't need, the difference being with Essence, you don't describe how you get to those outcomes, that you leave that to the experts who design the practices.
Yes, so basically the importance was that we moved from state to state, and this movement, how you moved, was not part of Essence, but the part of things you added on top of Essence in terms of, we call them practices.
And why was it important that Essence was led through CMAT, a non-profit organization, as opposed to doing it through a commercial organization?
It was about credibility. If a single company, even if it's very successful, we never ever be able to lead a development like that forever. So it's important to leave it to an organization that has the credibility of being led by experts around the world, and not by a guru somewhere, like the role I played before.
So that's where Essence was and how it got to where it is. So what I'd like to now is take you through a little bit of where Essence is today. I want to show you what people are doing with it and actually run a little exercise with you as to how people can use it today. But because there's a few people that are new to Essence, I thought I would just do a very quick reminder of what Essence is. So Ivar talked about it being a standard. It's an OMG standard. It's gone through a couple of versions. There's a new one coming out later this year. And what it gives you is this common ground, a theory for any development endeavor. And it works whether you're doing an existing method, whether you're doing something in-house, or whether you're following no method at all. It defines that common ground that's true for everybody. It gives you a language with which you can describe any practice. So we'll see later practices that are all codified using the same Essence language. So it gives a nice, easy way to describe a language that gives you good quality outcome or output. And you use that language to create practices. And you can bundle those practices together into ecosystems, and you can pick and choose. And it might be your mix of practices comes from the one ecosystem, from the one practice source, or maybe it comes from several. But it's all okay because they can work together because of that universal language. And then there's innovative tooling that, because of the language, means you can bring lots of different practices together into the same tool, and you can use that to define your ways of working. And you can use that language to make customizations and tailor your way of working. And in our tooling, at least, we very much focus on the serious games aspect. So bringing collaboration and interactivity into the use of a practice. And I'll show you some of that, and I want you to play some of those games with us. And then as we use Essence, as I said, we've got these practices. We've got physical cards so you can play games in person, although nowadays, people often are playing games remotely. So you've got digital tools like Essence Workbench and other tools. And then you've got this ability to customize things. So this slide gives you a nice little overview of how people are using Essence today in lots of different ways. You know, sometimes it is literally with physical cards on a table. post-it notes to do practice design, or it's inside the quite sophisticated tooling. And this is a list of some of the types of practices people have come together to create today. And you'll see that they're from different sources. We've got Scrum Inc. stuff with Scrum at Scale, Kanban University, Kanban, Nigel Thurlow and John Turner's flow system. And then there's all sorts of other things, some architecture practices, there's innovation practices and all kinds. And there's many more besides. Not on that slide as well as the bespoke practices that individuals and clients make. We very often see companies wanting their own way to describe something. And if they bring Essence along, it makes that description really easy for them. So that's kind of where we are today. But what does that really mean? Well, I'd like to show you a little bit of it. So I'm going to use a tool. It's a tool that we've developed here at IGI. Pierre leads the team that's developing it. And it's one that we're going to be launching the wider public soon. So stay tuned. Hopefully we'll be able to get you involved in early adoption of that, because this is a community that's interested in Essence, right? This is the tool. So I'm going to play a game with you. So let's go back to basics. Let's go back to a really simple game, which is looking at that common ground. So I'm not going through the what and the why of it, but this is about understanding where an organization or a team is. And the way that we do that is we look at that common ground. So Essence has got these different alphas, which describe the states that we go through. And they're true for any organization, however they happen to be working. So this is a really good diagnostic tool that you could pick up and use tomorrow. You can play this game with the cards. So you can see the cards are on the screen there. So this is the Essence Workbench tool. We've got this game board. It looks a bit like a canvas. It is a canvas, and you can see the cards here. And these are the same kind of cards that I could play on a table. So the way Essence works, as Ivar said, you've got these alphas. So this one is team, and we've got these different states that a team goes through, from seeded, formed, collaborating, performing, to adjourned. And if you look on the right-hand side, if I click on the team, it gives me a description of that. This is one of the really nice things. If I'm using a canvas, it's very easy to get lost in where I am, and I've got to remember lots of things, whereas this gives me a reminder on the right, and I can tick these things and they mirror on the screen. But what I really want you to start thinking about is, what do these check boxes mean? So if I've got a team, you imagine you were running this exercise with a team that you're familiar with. Can you tick this button that says mission defined? So is it clear what the mission is for the team? If it's not clear, what could you do? Or if it is clear, how do you know that it's clear? What would you see? What evidence would be present that says this team has a mission defined? Has anybody got any ideas? If your team says, yeah, our mission's defined, and you were to say to them, great, where is it? How can I see that? What might they show you? Any ideas in the chat? Vision statement, yeah. In a document somewhere, maybe it's on a board or a canvas, might be on the wall. Anything else? It's perfect first answer. Why do we need any others? So let's think about a vision statement then. So if you've got a competent, mature team, then they're perhaps quite capable of creating a vision statement on their own. And they can say, yep, I've got a vision statement. I'll tick that box. And maybe even in that vision, it talks about the constraints. It might talk about the team that's required. It might even tell you a bit about the growth of the team. And as Olivier says, yeah, if the team can explain to the mission and it's the same mission that the leader agrees with, then that's a great answer too. And actually that second part, let them write individually and compare. That's a brilliant technique. It's a really nice idea to see whether people are genuinely on the same page. And now we're starting to get into practices. So if a team doesn't know how to define their mission, then writing a vision statement might be one answer, but maybe there's a practice that helps them do that. There's maybe a practice around what it means to have a vision statement. That practice might have some examples. It might have some activities that say, well, you run a workshop, you might run this exact activity that Olivier suggested. Let's just see where we are with what we think the product is for. How close are our answers? So you start to see that a practice sits above this, and that practice to create a vision statement It's really about helping our team get to seeded. And it helps a team do it in a particular way. But there might be other ways they could get to be able to take this mission defined by, maybe there's a different practice that might be an agile chartering one, or maybe in Scrum you're using product goals or something like that. So the next bit I wanted to show you is what if the way that you envisage developing your product is not exactly with a team like this. So here's another example where a practice author has gone beyond just looking at the Essence team. And this is from the Flow System. The Flow System is Nigel Thurlow and John Turner and Brian Vieira. They've got a set of practices around complexity, distributed leadership, and team science. And their version of team, they're actually not so happy with this team one here. This one, if you look on the right, you see all the states. It's a bit too close to Tuckman's forming, storming, norming, forming model. And in the team science theory, that's not sufficient. So they've created another alpha, which sits above that. It's called team evolution. And team evolution, if you look on the right, it's a bit more complex or complicated, perhaps. So it's got a few more things going on. And if we look through some of these states, we begin with looking at the needs for the team. What kind of collaboration, what kinds of tasks? Is it task work or teamwork? We think about our knowledge, skills, and attributes. We think of the size. We think about how that team is going to be teamwork trained, and that's a specific thing inside the Flow System. There's a practice called teamwork training that will help you get these things ticked. And it isn't until we get to this state here we start thinking about our mission. So here's an example of a set of practices that have said, well, I need to put more structure around the work than just what Essence has in the common ground. And to get to the same place I might get to up here with the mission defined, it's taking me a little bit longer. It's taking me, I've got a few more things to do, because the problem I'm solving, the reason why the Flow System exists is to solve more complex problems. The problem I'm solving is more complex. I've got more things to do to create a team that is going to be equipped to solve that problem. So a quick look in the chat. Diane, one of my favorite exercises is to have them write the same sentence together. Oh, that's a nice idea. Everyone takes turn and edits, deletes, and adds a word. So they collaboratively build a sentence that describes the mission. Is that right? That sounds great. And one of the nice things with the tooling here is it's very open and free flow, and it allows you to play all these sorts of games. You've got a canvas, you can work in different parts of it. You can facilitate serious games, with the aim being that you understand the work more strongly and you understand the practices around it more strongly. Any thoughts on that for now? I've got one more game I want to show you. Anybody want to say anything? If you want to unmute and make a comment, that's you're more than welcome.
Yes, maybe just a question. Do you hear me?
Yes.
So you explained that anyone can customize a bit the different stages for the notion of a team. But did I not understood that the notion of these alphas is to progress, let's say, more or less in parallel on the different alphas? So
Yes.
how can we guarantee that when we do tailoring of these different stages of the state on certain alpha, we are still compliant to be in a good state to move forward with the others?
Yeah, that's a good question. So as Olivier said, there are other alphas inside Essence. We've got the kernel ones, which are these 7 on the right here. And then within a given practice, say, for example, teamwork training, it's got its own alphas. So I don't necessarily want to go and start tweaking something here. For example, maybe in this one, I could create a new checklist item and I can say something like, I don't know, create mission statement. Is that going to be contradicting or repeating something that's happening somewhere else? So the idea that you advance all the alphas at once is exactly the same, exactly true. So you might have all the alphas, you could have them on the same board, and you could check where you are against all of them, and you could see if there's a conflict. If you're trying to advance them all at the same sort of time, the conflict should become obvious if there are any. But yeah, it's something there's a skill involved in customizing. You know, it's a dangerous tool if you misuse it, just like any tool. But because you can connect the progress into the kernel alphas, hopefully you shouldn't go too far wrong. But if you do, then give us a call. We can come and help you. Let me show you one quick other game. So this is an idea of a game that's really flexible. So the idea here is I've got something that I want to emphasize. So this game particularly is about values. So values and principles are associated with the culture of an organization. If you want to change the culture, very often you'll define your target culture in terms of values. So for example, you might decide we want an agile organization, so we want to value customer collaboration over contract negotiation. That's great. We can all sign up to that. We can go to the big town hall meetings, get our mouse mats and posters, and we can all leave happy we understand the values of the organization. Except that's not what the culture is defined by. It's not defined by the values the leadership state. It's defined by the behaviors and habits of the people within the organization. So what happens if the behaviors and the habits don't reinforce the value? Then you don't get the culture that you want. How do you change people's behaviors and values, behaviors and habits? Well, you change that through the way that they work, the activities they do, the things they produce. And what does Essence do? Well, Essence describes the activities people do in practices and the products that they produce. So if you can connect the values and the work products and activities, then you can connect the target culture with the habits and behaviors of your people. What does that mean? So for example, if we do have this as a target value, customer collaboration over contract negotiation, and we've got Kanban that might be happening, how can I bring that value into, for example, my Kanban flow review, which is this thing on the right, an opportunity for the team and its stakeholders to review the aspects of the service. How can I behave in that meeting in a way that demonstrates customer collaboration? Or how can I behave in that meeting in a way that actually values contract negotiation, stability, prior agreement, sign-offs, change control, things like that? So any thoughts? How could, if you were brainstorming with the team, how can I bring customer collaboration more strongly into my team retrospective? What would you do? Let's get some ideas. Any thoughts? It's late in the evening. I get it. So maybe, for example, it's my team retrospective. I could think about the customer interactions we had over the period that we're reviewing. So maybe that's something I could do. Maybe we could give ourselves a score. Maybe we could do that. We could score our collaboration with customers. There's an idea. Maybe if there's something that could be the opposite, maybe I've done something, what would be a negative thing? What might happen in my retrospective that shows that I'm not valuing customer collaboration over contract negotiation? Any thoughts on negative things you might see?
Measuring the time that you spent for Q&A doing meetings with the customer.
Yeah, so focusing on time rather than on customers.
Yeah, I was mentioning if you do an iteration review or inspect and adapt, and you look about how much time you spend about showcasing stuff, and not and versus the time that you allow customer to reply and react on it.
Yeah, so the development team using the product rather than the customer using it, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, good. So you can see that if you're running an exercise like this, you can get people to take it in turns to put post-it notes on the board. You end up with, you know, it doesn't need to be very many, a handful of things like this for the different meetings, and then you can decide what to do with that. You can take these post-it notes off. You can turn them into to-dos, and you can tick them off when you've done them and things like that. So there's some nice techniques you can do with connecting things inside a practice with things that you want to value. And it doesn't need to be within the same practice. Kanban, of course, has its own foundations, and we could have picked some of the Kanban patterns around the service delivery change management principles and things like that. But this is a way of showing that you can sort of customize it a bit. So I've got my Kanban practice, but it's actually this agile value that I'm bringing in. And you can mix and match different things from different places and get what you want as an organization. So that's like a little insight into some of the tooling and some of the games that Essence enables you to play. I mean, that's a tiny, tiny insight into some of the things that I could have shown you, but hopefully it's given you an idea of some of the interaction and some of the things that we can do. And actually the value of having a tool that, you know, all I need to do is hover over it and I can remind myself of what this element is about. It's part of what we talk about is solving the Achilles heel and bringing an active behaviors into the team. So rather than passive being, I'll be taught Kanban and expected to remember it. Here, when I'm actually using it, I've got the reminder right at my fingertips, and I might well have, you know, checklists that I'm ticking off to make sure that I'm progressing properly, and I don't need to just remember on whatever it took me to pass my exam. So that's the bit I wanted to stop at with the present, and I want to bring Pierre in. But is there any questions or any thoughts at the moment? Okay, so Pierre is leading the tooling, but he's relatively new to Essence. So Pierre, I'm interested in what interested you about Essence and made you want to get involved in the next generation of tools for it.
Thanks, Simon, and hello, everyone. To answer this, I'm going to correct something you said during your introduction. You said that I made many startups, many of them being successful. It's the other way around. Most of them were absolute disasters, and 3 of them were successful. And this is what caught my attention when I discovered Essence. So I've been exposed to as many software development teams as you can possibly imagine, each of them with different ways of working. A lot of abstraction on top of that. Very difficult to reason about, you know, how to do things, how to get things done, what's the kind of side effects on each of those different ways of working. And this is what was most intriguing to me at the beginning, was this ability to codify ways of working in almost a computer language with a very clear, not strict, but well-defined nomenclature and set of semantics. And I mean, I recommend to anyone to try and have a look at the standard, in particular the technical version of it. You become addicted to it quite quickly. So the first thing that I tried to do was to implement my own. I quickly realized that this is not a one-person job, but this is what caught my attention. How can we maybe get more knowledge from the formulation of our ways of working in a language that allows computers to extract intelligence from it? That's it.
So Eva talked a bit about Waypointer, and he talked about the time being right now to come back towards AI, having the experience in the past. But I'm interested in your vision for AI with Essence, and what you think that looks like when you think about what the tooling can achieve.
Sure. Okay, so I guess we'd start to define what we consider being artificial intelligence. There's quite a debate. So Waypointer could be seen as a rule-based advisor. All those rules are, I'm not going to say hard-coded, but they're quite set. And most importantly, to execute then those rules, you need to have knowledge. But unfortunately, those systems were operating in a near vacuum of information. So apart from the single user who was feeding it information, that system had no idea. My take on the topic now.
What can we look forward to? You have a slide you want me to show?
If you want, yes.
So do you want to talk through So what have we got here? What's the vision here?
Okay. So in the center, the idea is for us to create a system that ingests as much information as possible and utilizes the way practices are formulated using Essence to try and correlate things that are being done in the team versus how they are described and should be done. And because Essence allows to codify most of those things, those interactions, and as now you're in a position where you can capture those instances of interactions through Slack, through Jira, through all those things, it's very likely that we can build something that really gives a much deeper insight of what's happening in the team and potentially remedies some situations much more efficiently. So that's the idea. So that system would ingest as much data as possible, but the important bit here is that its main corpus of knowledge would be the set of practices that are being used by the team members. And that system that we're describing would not be necessarily part of the tool that Simon was showing earlier, TeamSpace. It would be completely standalone, and TeamSpace would consume as you know, an API, AI services. That's the idea. But any other system, your system, my system, could potentially also hit that central expert AI system, feed it information from the team, and get intelligence from it.
So why wouldn't you just use an off-the-shelf thing like OpenAI? Why is this system better?
Do you want to talk about hype, maybe?
Well, I mean, everybody's using. It's hard to find a system or a product today that doesn't say it's using AI.
Yes.
And I'm sure that for a lot of them, you scratch the surface, and maybe they're not. Maybe they're just, you know, sneakily integrating a simple query and pretending that they're an AI system.
Yes. So you're right. 70%, 80% of all the different startups that I interacted with and were claiming that they're doing AI, what they're doing really is that under the hood, they're using ChatGPT, which, let's not forget, is a large language model. So if you're lucky and you ask something to a large language model, you get an answer that's true. And you're lucky because the answer was part of the training data. But as soon as you start hitting niche topics, you very quickly step into the realm of hallucination, where your large language model is going to make sentences, but you have absolutely no clue whether it's based on factual information or just, you know, the statistic inference loop that's going under the hood. So my claim here is that, so of course, we don't want to just use an off-the-shelf large language model because it wouldn't have this augmented capability to understand ways of working through structured data and the semantics of Essence. If I take any practice and crunch it into something that's well structured in terms of relationships and find ways to give it, for example, to a knowledge graph, then that's an excellent support tool for a large language model then to explain it to a user. The knowledge doesn't come from the large language model. It comes from your retrieval augmented generative system. So that's the idea. We don't want to use off-the-shelf stuff to give answers. We want to feed answers to off-the-shelf tools, maybe. So they're just, you know, explain better and better English, because I'm French. I don't do a good job at that. And yeah.
So the structure then of Essence means that you're able to get a far more precisely crafted prompt, and then you're more likely to be getting the right trusted data back from the language model, as opposed to hoping that it's going to trawl its training data and give you the right answer. Yeah,
that's correct. There is a very easy experiment to make. In particular, you would observe this in earlier versions of those large language models. If you take, I'll give you a dumb example, but if you take a color and that large language model doesn't necessarily have seen that color in the context of a car, but has seen it in the context of planes, it might tell you that a blue van has flaps and spoilers. Because you mentioned the color blue, that has a semantic domain that's closer to planes. That's a dumb example. Now with Essence, you rule out those kinds of possibilities, because as soon as you're referring to something that's been seen in practice data, all the different degrees of separation in that knowledge graph is known and can be used to contextualize whichever machine learning tool you use behind the scenes.
Ivar, you've been involved in AI for a long time. You talked about the experiences with Waypointer back in early 2000s. What are your thoughts on this?
I want to make things simple. I wanted to understand that we wouldn't do anything in AI space if we didn't have a clear differentiator, a differentiator that would make give better results than anything else available. So when I started to think about it many years ago, and when and we made that failure, the product we developed was not the right product and not the right time. But I knew it would come back. It definitely would come back. I just was waiting for a trigger like ChatGPT. And what I knew, actually what we did when we created Essence, was we had this experience from a waypointer in our mind. If we are going to do something that is will be successful, it has to be prepared for AI. So we have seen Essence as a platform for a playground for adopting AI. And that you can just imagine that if you give some kids a ball, and you ask them to play, and they don't have any rules, what that would result in. Whereas football, and in particular professional football, played all around the world, there are millions of people playing football, and they follow rules. And these rules are the playground for playing the game, football. The same thing, I saw Essence as a playground for adopting AI. And it actually, the more we work with it, the more we see, as you heard from Pierre, that this is really our differentiator. So that's why we say AI plus Essence is fundamentally better than just AI. And that is, of course, what could you call it? Just play with words, but that is what it actually means. But then, what does it mean to be better? What is it that we get thanks to this that makes it better for people trying to adopt a way of working? So that is what we have found. It gives many values.
And some of the things from what Pierre was saying, you know, it's that precision, it's the placing some boundaries around the question and the answer, but also the multiplayer aspect. You know, mostly when I'm using ChatGPT, it's me talking to the computer. Even if I'm in a team, it just sees my answers, and if they're talking to it, it sees their answers independently of mine. And then the ways that you can bring gameplay into it. Yeah. It's far easier to get better answers when you can engage with the data and play games with it rather than just reading the text. Mike, you've got your hand up. Would you like to add something or ask a question?
Yeah, a little bit of both, actually. So
you're quite quiet, Mike. Could you maybe put your mic up a bit?
Can you hear me at all?
That's better, yes.
Yeah, okay. Apologies if it's really low. I have problems with this headset. So it's a bit of a question, bit of a statement, and apologies for any misunderstanding. The illustration that Pierre had seemed to be an AI intelligence agent to mine data and understanding how it was being used in order to help people. but isn't there some low-hanging fruit available as well, in that the fabric, the space that you were helping us understand a little bit earlier, Simon, if you could get an assistant to actually help you understand how to use it, to potentially create templates. So if you said, hey, we want to adopt Scrum, but we've got no idea where to begin, I think just like you were being an assistant to automate that through some type of AI, and even better, because I like it, voice interface seems to be a bit of low-hanging fruit. Coming back to, I think, Ivar's analogy, it would kind of be like having some juniors playing soccer, football, call it what you will, but actually teaching them a little bit how they need to play, what kicking a football looks like, what the posts, what a goal looks like, all of that type of stuff. And so I think, to me, unless I missed the intention of what was being said, that seems to be another approach that could enhance the tool and make it far more user-friendly, I think.
Yeah, Pierre, any thoughts?
Yes, indeed. You're absolutely right. This is bang on the money. Those two arrows that you see on the left of the diagram, in the bottom left-hand side, they're exactly that. They are low-hanging fruit in the sense that so this is part of prototypes that we're already building. Those types of functionality merely automates your sessions with said tool, TeamSpace, and only TeamSpace. So you typically would ask a question. It's on the, maybe we don't do a demo. You would tell the tool that you would like to start a game board that focuses on the sprint planning. And now you've got a loop through LangChain, where your model knows how to create a game board, and more importantly, based on the focus that you want, through the practice data, will already place stuff on that game board and potentially guide you into approaching all those concepts. So I'm saying that this is, you're right, a low-hanging fruit, because this is stateless. This doesn't take into consideration the instance of the practice that you're using, only the class. So it knows about Scrum in this context, but it doesn't know about the current state of your backlog. It doesn't know about your the minutes of your sprint planning last week. That's the next level that I was trying to mention. And in particular, what Simon mentioned as well, the prototype that we've built since day one has multiplayer capabilities in mind. And you can have several people participate in the same conversation with said AI. The thing is that AI is contextualized with many elements that are very useful for the inference, such as your role in the team, the amount of time that you spend interacting with your product owner, and that kind of stuff. So yes, there are low-hanging fruit, and we'll probably do some of them. I'm personally, and I think this is probably also the business voice, but I'm not going to say for the business, I'm personally more interested in a bit more advanced cases.
Thank you. Does that answer the question, Mike?
Yeah, it certainly does. And I think that as an iterative model, that sounds perfectly reasonable. As you say, start in a stateless environment and then start bringing in a suggestion or engine that can nudge behaviors in a particular direction, or offer suggestions,
Yes.
whatever it might be. So I agree.
We're running close to 7, and I'm keen to get some more questions. While you think about some questions, I wanted to ask one more to Pierre, because there's been a bit of a running theme through the history of Essence of community. So beginning with the community around CMAT, which is a combination of industry, academia, and methodologists, through the community that Ivar's built around this different practice authors that have come together to use Essence. I'm interested in the community going forward and what opportunities there are that you think we should harness, Pierre.
Yes. I take this particular topic to my heart almost more than AI, or probably even more. A bit of background. When I joined, this was 7-8 months ago. What struck me actually was that before I had a non-existent exposure to Essence. And some of my thoughts were very strongly oriented towards, well, it seems that it's well known in large corporate environments, but it also seems that people that are not in large corporate environments would benefit from it and would definitely find ways to improve ways of working with their team if they would be easy ways for them to be exposed to practices, to essence, and so on and so forth. And so there was quite a bit of discussion with the team. What do we do? And what's right now being considered, and very seriously considered, in fact, is to try and get a platformization of practices. What I mean by that is that it would be multifaceted in the sense that you have all sorts of different users, practice authors, coaches, maybe practice consumers, users, large companies, and so on. You can imagine something that's public for most of it, like all now platforms do. You have most of the stuff public unless you decide that you want something private. And then you have enablement of interactions that allow people to get value from it, such as I'm a coach and I get certified with practice X and Z on that platform. And then I can start opening conversation threads, participating other conversations on another practice page, start using tools as part of the platform to disperse knowledge, maybe get hired on the platform. I don't know. So this is what we're considering right now. Yes.
So we've got a question from, now I'm not sure to pronounce the name. It says on the screen, Ramklin. If you want to unmute and ask your question, please. You go and get your hand up. Yeah.
I just have to find the button. I'm Michael. This is just my acronym in Ericsson. Anyway, I'm interested in what's the most interesting use cases you see, Pierre, for your AI expert machine?
Okay.
With the data you get through Essence, what's the use case you see would be the most interesting one?
Yes, we have a few examples. So if we consider just the class, so say use case is 2.0, you can ask anything you want and you'll get an answer. But again, that's very flat. That's not contextual. Now, level 2 is you can ask questions, but that tool knows about your team and knows about you. And so now you start getting answers based on your work and your way of using the practice. So that's instance level 1. So level 2 of the thing. Then you can imagine level 3.5, which is in touch with your own tools, such as Slack, your commits maybe in your software repository, your commit messages, your tickets in GitHub or in Jira. And now instead of having a passive AI, which only responds when you address it, you get more eventful opportunities to get suggestions, reminders, potentially even the suggestion of the introduction of part of another practice that would fit better the way you work, this kind of stuff. There are more levels to this. I think already the level 3 is not trivial to reach, but there are ways to do it. Maybe Simon can also explain a bit of the ideas we had, the multi-practice type of approach for AI. But that's it. Does that answer at least a bit of your question?
Give me a view of what you had in mind. Thank you.
Okay. You're welcome.
Yeah, one of the challenges is with the multi-practice, which is where it matters that I've got other practices in my way of working. And it's not the same as asking each individual practice a question, because the kind of answer depends on which other practices I have. So by being able to kind of consolidate the different practices together and ask a kind of meaningful contextual question, then you're going to get better insights. Just the way that a rail coach would remember which other practices you've got, and they would understand what they're doing, and they would give you a contextual answer back. Well, how do we get the system to do that? Any more questions? So I'm going to ask Ivar his thoughts on the kind of the use cases around AI. I am going to have to disappear for 1 minute. My shopping's arrived at the door, and I've got to go and let them in. So I'll let Ivar talk about AI for a second, and I'll be back in 1 minute.
Yeah, we already today see that competent people are using custom GPT to support, for instance, Scrum. And it clearly gives value. But it's limited to one practice usually, or a couple of practices within the same family. Whereas having a system, I mean, like Simon was just mentioning, having a system where you actually support not only one practice, but basically any practice that has been codified in Essence. And they are quite many today. We have about 100 of them. And so that is a big difference. The other thing I wanted to mention is that we have all the time realized that there need to be space in a forum like ours for all the people who have done the work in creating practices. We don't, let's say, borrow practices and maybe give a pat on the shoulder of the creator. We actually let them own the practices, and they create a little sub-community around it. And we are the instrument to help them be accessible in our ecosystem of practices. So, and that is what we want to continue with this new initiative, platform, a platform for anybody interested in talking about practices, and where people can start very light and present their practices without having to think about Essence. But as they feel more value, as we mature, because it has taken time to get people who are methodologists, created methods, to really adopt and understand the values. It takes a little time. So if one of the things I would like to ask you, all of you, if you could help us or give me ideas about what you would like to see on such a platform. What would you like to see? What kind of support? So we want to build this platform, and we really don't know the commercial value to us, but we believe that if it's valuable, we probably can get help to develop what we are doing, because it takes a lot of investments. Help in terms of, anything. I'm not talking about we asking for some money or something like that.
So I've put a slide up with the email addresses that you can reach us on. You can contact us through the chat facility on MeetUp if you haven't got a chance to write these down, or you can find contact details on the website at www.ivarjakobsen.com. And we really would like to hear from you, because you are the Essence community, and this that we've been talking to you about is for your support. So we're really interested in how it can best help and support you, and what you would benefit from.
I'd like to just expand on that question, if I can, Simon. Tell us what you would like to see on such platform, but not just platform. I'm very, very keen on understanding what kind of community you would like. And I'll give maybe an example. Go crazy in your suggestions. I can really imagine a community that includes technologists who know how to build stuff, and would be happy to co-own some of the tools with contributions, open source, doesn't matter. I'm curious about what you guys would come up with.
Mike, you have something to say?
Yeah, I was just going to give you a personal insight from me. So I've been a agile coach now for a little bit. I know Scrum, I know Kanban, I know Kinevin. Prior to that, I did RUP. So Eva, thank you very much for that. I don't know a lot about how you actually use and how Essence is actually used. I've just had a look now. It's only 7 days ago that, Simon, you put up the Essence and Essence Workbench YouTube videos up on a playlist. And I think personally, I'd be far more keen on using it if I had some inkling about what it does, and therefore I'd have an understanding of how it can benefit me. So to me, the YouTube videos are good. The demos, I think, are really good. Once we understand what it can do, we can then understand how it could be enhanced in order to help us.
That's a good point.
Yes, yeah. We've got that stuff in mind, but yeah, very keen. I might get in touch with you if that's all right. I can help you.
Okay, let me say that we have been working on this for it's almost 20, it is 20 years, and we have learned all the time, since the initiative is quite huge, even when you think about it from beginning. But we have learned all the time by working with clients, and the way we talk today is very different how we talked a year ago or 2 years ago. So we learn all the time, and what you said, Mike, resonates very much with what our experience is, and what we hear from people. So we appreciate it, and anybody who has ideas how we can do it better, we are welcome.
Does anybody else have any comments or thoughts or questions that you'd like to ask? Let me just double check the chat.
And Mike, since you're Swedish, don't hesitate to reach out to me. It's nice to have, Sweden is a small country, so it's nice to have friends there.
Thank you very much.
So if there's no more questions or comments, then I'd like to end the meetup by thanking you very much for your attendance and for your contributions. Hope you found it useful and interesting. I'd like to thank especially Ivar and Pierre for their contributions. And if you'd like to join with me in a brief round of applause virtually, thank you for both Pierre and Ivar, but also for everybody attending, for taking part in this evening's Essence for Agility meetup. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.